Welcome back to the swamp, my friends, and welcome if you're new. Today we're going to be sharing some creepy and downright strange horror stories from the deep woods and just outside in general. As always, if you have a story that you would like to share in a future episode, be sure to send it on in at swampdweller.net or the email you can find in the description down below. If you're on Reddit, you can also submit them at r/thedarkswamp. I'd love to see all of your stories. Now, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and get ready for these creepy and downright strange outside and deep woods horror stories that'll freak you out tonight. The Whispering Pines by Arnold A. The woods of North Carolina have always had a certain allure, drawing adventurers and nature enthusiasts alike into their dense embrace. I had heard many tales about these woods, stories of hidden treasures and eerie happenings, but none of that ever really deterred me from planning a weekend hiking trip with my best friend, Emily. We set out early on a crisp Saturday morning, the sun casting long shadows through the towering pines. The trailhead was unmarked, a secret gem undiscovered through hours of research and local whispers. Our backpacks were filled with essentials, and our spirits were high as we ventured deeper into the forest. The first few hours were blissful. The birds sang their morning chorus, and the scent of pine needles and damp earth filled the air. As we hiked, Emily and I talked about everything and nothing, our laughter blending in with the natural symphony around us. Around midday, we decided to take a break and have a lunch by a small babbling brook. The water was cool and refreshing, and it felt good to rest our legs. Afterward, we packed up and continued our journey, eager to see what else the forest really had to offer. It was late afternoon when we stumbled upon a clearing that seemed out of place amidst the thick woods. In the center stood an old abandoned campsite. The remnants of a fire pit surrounded by weathered logs suggested it had yet to be used in years. Tattered tents, their fabric shredded by time and the elements, flapped gently in the breeze. "Whoa, look at this," Emily said, her eyes wide with curiosity. "Yeah, it's like something out of a horror movie," I replied, half-jokingly. We explored the campsite cautiously, the eerie silence growing more pronounced with each step. There was a sense of unease that settled over me, but I brushed it off as nothing more than my imagination running wild. "Hey, check this out," Emily called from one of the other tents. She held up an old, water-damaged journal. The pages were brittle and yellowed, but the handwriting was still legible. "What you got there?" I asked, peering over her shoulder. It's a journal. It's looked like it belonged to somebody named Sarah," Emily said, flipping through the pages. "She talks about something here with her friends, probably a camping trip if I had to guess." After some time, the writing got weird, and it's hard to explain just how weird. It became more and more illegible, almost like the thoughts were just kind of rambling on. A chill ran down my spine. "Let's keep moving. This place is giving me the creeps." We packed up quickly, leaving the abandoned campsite behind. As we made our way back to the trail, the forest seemed to close in around us. The once inviting trees now loomed ominously. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long twisting shadows. An hour passed, and the unsettling feeling only grew stronger. The forest was unnaturally quiet, as if it were holding its breath. Then, faintly, at first, I heard it. A whispering, barely audible but unmistakable. "Did you hear that?" Emily asked, her voice trembling. "Yeah, I did," I whispered back, straining to pinpoint the source. The whispering grew louder, a chorus of hushed voices murmuring words we couldn't quite understand. Panic set in, and we quickened our pace, the trail becoming more challenging to follow in the dimming light. Suddenly, the whispering stopped, replaced by an eerie silence. We paused, our breaths ragged, listening intently. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement, a shadow darting between the trees. "Run!" I shouted, grabbing Emily's hand. We sprinted through the forest, the shadows seeming to chase us. The path was almost invisible now, but we didn't care. We just needed to get out of here. Branches scratched at our faces, and the underbrush clawed at our legs, but we didn't stop. After what felt like an eternity, we burst out of the woods and into the clearing. The evening sky a welcoming sight. We collapsed to the ground, gasping for air, our hearts pounding. "What was that?" Emily panted, her eyes wide with fear. "I don't know, but we're not sticking around to find out," I said, pulling her to our feet. We returned to the car as quickly as possible, the sense of being watched never leaving us. As we drove away, I glanced back at the forest. The trees stood tall and silent, their secrets hidden once more. We never spoke about what happened that day, but I knew we both felt the same. Something in those woods was watching, waiting, and we had narrowly escaped its grasp. From that day on, the Whispering Pines of North Carolina held a new, sinister meaning for me. It was a place where the line between reality and supernatural blurred, where the past lingered and whispered its dark secrets to those who dared to listen, and I, for one, would never set foot there again. The Bag Lady of the Woods by Specialist Dog 665. In high school, during a quiet summer night, two friends and I went to investigate a local ghost road. It was rumored to have a ghost lady who would appear carrying a couple of bags and then dematerialize in front of you. The road has fields, woods, and houses spread out, but it did not feel remote or creepy during the day. We pulled up in a little pickup truck on the side of the road, turned the engine off, and sat quietly with the windows down. The cool night air felt perfect. We were still talking like usual about life and girlfriends and really half paying attention to the dark road that stretched away from us. Then I saw something, and I guess I'll do my best to explain what I saw. During a lull in the conversation, I saw the silhouette of a 3 to 4 foot tall humanoid shadow walking down the opposite side of the street no more than 40 feet away. I didn't really say anything but stared in disbelief. It looked as if it was a Muppet, like something of that size. No sooner had I seen this thing, it had walked through a darker shadow cast by a nearby tree in the moonlight and emerged out the other end of the shadow, looking like an average house cat, like it had shapeshift. It was no longer upright, but distinctly a cat now. It walked a few more steps, looked at us, and silently bowed over the guardrail into the woods directly opposite of us. It took only 5 seconds from the small, weird 2-foot walker to the cat over the guardrail. I said nothing the entire time. Strangely, nobody seemingly did. Then the driver said to nobody, "Oh, it's just a cat." I told him why there was confusion in what we had seen, and he said, "I thought it was a small person at first, but I guess it's just a cat, clearly." I said, "Wait, I saw the small person too." And we just looked at each other, took the cue, and headed home. This was almost 30 years ago now. The area has gotten substantially more built up with new homes and such. I think about this from time to time. I wonder if my eyes played tricks on me. But it is noteworthy, and somebody else in the vehicle saw the same thing at the same time. Summer Camp Gone Wrong by EMC80s. This incident happened just a few days ago, July 2024 for people listening in the future. Even though I see myself as a rather challenging and experienced 19-year-old female, it still runs through my mind like an endless movie. I work as a camp counselor, and just so you envision this correctly, don't think about the stereotypical summer camp as seen in The Parent Trap or The Addams Family. The summer camp is run by a local school and church, so most camp activities are held inside a school building rather than out in the wilderness. We run different themed camps for kids aged 5 to 12 from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. The camp also provides an aftercare program from 12 p.m. to 6 p.m. This incident occurred during the aftercare program in the gymnasium. To understand the story more, you must know what the inflatable bumper balls are. In short, they are giant plastic balls that you can wear over your body. Most people enjoy using them to play an adventurous game of soccer or to battle to see who will fall over first while running into each other. In one of the other summer camps, specifically for the middle schoolers, they could play with them in the gym. Maybe not the best place, but the kids were old enough to know basically what was too much. And usually, we didn't really ever have any injuries sustained. After 12 p.m., these bumper balls were left in the corner of the gym so the aftercare kids could focus on their activities for the rest of the day. Fast forward to around 4 p.m., just as I'm about to leave for work, I noticed that some of the camp counselors are in the gym playing around with the bumper balls. At the same time, a couple of the kids from the aftercare program are running around, itching to know what these giant plastic balls are. I just crack a smile, thinking nothing of it as I try to pull out my phone and take a video. However, as soon as I lift my head, the terror begins. I look up to see two camp counselors running into each other, and as the lighter one goes down, so does one of the little kids in the aftercare. All you see is their head catch their fall, and you hear a crack so unsettling that I can still listen to it on replay in my mind despite it being days ago. Currently, most camp counselors are in the gym, either witnessing the kids fall or just hearing the crack of their head hitting the ground. Instantly, I knew I was the only one mature enough to snap out of the shock to help this kid. As I rush over to them, I only see the kids' eyes. Their poor eyes roll in the back of their heads. Immediately, I know that is not a good sign. I start speaking to the child in hopes that they are responsive, and for the first 30 seconds, it is nothing but steady breathing. As the other camp counselors around me are causing a commotion, some of them yelling at the counselor who hit the kid, and the others who are scared about what just happened, I tell the counselors closest to me to grab one of our bosses. Thankfully, as I continue to try to receive some sort of response from the child, they finally were able to let out a cry, but not a loud one. A cry that sounded confused about what had just happened. Eventually, I picked up the child into my arms and took them outside where there was less noise. It was apparent the child was going through every symptom of a concussion, immense tiredness, confusion, slurred words. My boss got a hold of their parents, and from there they took over. An ambulance arrived on the scene, and by then the child was throwing up and crying out in pain. It just felt so bad, and all I could do was watch and pray that everything would be okay. This may not be terrifying to some viewers. However, try to put yourself in my shoes. A 19-year-old just witnessed one of the youngest campers fall headfirst into a gym floor, temporarily unresponsive, eyes rolled back. I don't know. It's one of those terrifying things. I have been haunted by that experience and the guilt of not saying how dangerous those bumper balls were to the kids playing around. And even worse is that most of the other camp counselors honestly, they were able to get over the situation rather quickly, like they didn't even care. It shows their lack of responsibility and carefulness towards the kids. Despite this story not being as terrifying as a home invasion or any physical experience, I just needed to share how this event had put so much strain on me mentally. I guess you could call it a psychological horror that only a few can understand. I'm going to preface this story by saying that I'm currently a 19-year-old girl, and when this story occurred, I was 14. In the summer of 2016, my grandmother, 2 younger sisters, and I drove 19 hours to San Antonio in Texas. My great-aunt lives there, and my recently deceased great-uncle lived there too. We were all going to visit my grandmother's oldest brother, as he had never really spent much time with us before. We spent the entire trip going out and about this military retirement home that my great-uncle lived in. We went to a neat little area. It had this little thrift shop that was part of the community, and I bought an old letter opener, which I pretended was a dagger to freak out my friends. The trip went well. We were there for about a week. We said our goodbyes to our distant relatives, and my grandmother told my sisters and me that she wanted to visit the Holocaust Museum before we left Texas and started our long drive home. The museum had, and still has, a picture of her father in it. He was one of the first doctors to go to Dachau, which was a concentration camp, and the picture was taken in front of a rather large pile of innocent people whose lives were stolen at Dachau, while my great-grandfather stands behind them with a look of sorrow. My sister and I readily agreed to go. We wanted our sweet little grandma to see a picture of her daddy. She was extremely excited to show us the photo. We eventually arrived at the Holocaust Museum, and it was devastatingly beautiful. The overall mood of the museum was very somber, and the walls were lined with photos from concentration camps and various other things that were present during the Holocaust. As we started our tour through the museum, I realized I had to use the restroom. Curse my tiny, 14-year-old bladder, but I decided I would hold it until we were finished with the tour. Little did I know, the tour would take about an hour. I suffered through most of the tour, and distracted myself by listening to people who worked at the museum and listening to my grandma recall stories from her father. There were a few people scattered about the museum as we walked through it. The lights were somewhat dim, as most museum lights were. I noticed that it was oddly quiet though. Most people were very empathetic, as was I throughout the tour. Near the end of the tour, my grandma finally found the photo she wanted to show us. She pointed to it excitedly and told the workers, "That's my daddy." She went on to tell the worker about her father and what he did at the place, and at this moment, I realized I really had to use the restroom. My siblings were looking at me funny as I frantically searched for the bathroom. My sister, I will call her Jay, pointed to a restroom not far from where we stood. I told my sisters that I would be right back, and I practically ran to the restroom. I opened the door expecting it to be vacant, but to my demise it was packed with women who were babbling on about nothing important to a 14-year-old. Now, I do not know if it was something wrong with me psychologically, but I absolutely cannot use a random restroom when other people are present. It has always been an issue, and it still is. You can imagine how rough that can be in certain situations. I resigned to waiting for the mass of women to leave the restroom, and as luck would have it, the women all left in about 5 minutes. There were about 6 stalls in this restroom, the handicap stall being to the far left. I rushed into the stall directly next to it and practically threw myself onto the toilet. Except, as I sat there, I began to have an eerie feeling. I held my breath. The restroom was completely silent, and I knew it should be because everybody had left, but something churned in my stomach. The silence was deafening. I felt sick, like the air was becoming thicker. Someone could have cut a knife through it. Something was not right. I needed to get out of this stall. I did not even use the toilet. I just scrambled from the stall, assessed the restroom, and I was just trying to see what was happening. Everything seemed alright. I did not see anyone. The stall doors were closed, and yet I still felt scared. I went to wash my hands, as I always would wash my hands even if I did not actually need to. Something inside me told me to look at the handicapped stall. I do not know what persuaded me to look, but I did. Alarm bells were ringing in my head. I slowly leaned back to get a better look at the stall, and my heart dropped. I know people claim that their heart sinks or drops or they freeze with fear, and all of what they claim is definitely true. My heart jumped to my throat and I suddenly felt ill. What I saw was a leg on the floor, a child's leg. It was attached to somebody, but I was too scared to investigate any further. I ran from the restroom to my younger sisters. I do not know why I did this. I was a dumb 14-year-old, but I needed my sisters to confirm what I had just seen. They were skeptical when I told them. I dragged my sisters back to the restroom with me, begging them to be quiet, and I pointed to the handicapped stall. My youngest sister, I will call her N, looked at me in alarm, and then Jay did the same. There was long hair next to the leg now, almost as if there was somebody crouching to look under the stall at us, but at the same time, they were completely still, unnaturally still. I grabbed both of my sister's hands and urgently pulled them from the restroom. We ran up to my grandma, and all 3 of us started rambling at once. The worker by my grandmother looked at all of us with concern. I eventually explained the situation to the kind woman who worked there, and she looked very unsettled. I watched as she went to the large, burly security guard. He looked from her to us and said he would go look. We waited, with my grandmother for quite a while the worker and the security guard came back. He exited the woman's restroom quickly and rushed to speak to the worker. A man was speaking on his phone in there. The The security guard spoke slowly. My heart seemed to drop a little bit more. I definitely saw a child's leg in there. There was not a man in there too, was there? I thought. The woman glanced at my sisters and me before listening to the security guard again. The security guard confirmed that there were 2 people in the handicap stall, and by this point, my grandmother was freaked out, enough to say that it was time for us to leave. The security guard had readily agreed. I am sorry that we did not stick around to find out what that man was doing in the woman's restroom, in the handicap stall with a child on the floor. I did not get to find out why or what happened to that man, and I still wonder why they were so silent that I could not hear them breathing in the stall next to me, or why he was on the phone after I rushed out. I will say, though, that this experience left me with an even bigger fear of public restrooms. And since I have such a wild imagination, I did not sleep that night. Images of that leg and the thoughts of someone trying to peek at me under the stall haunted me for a long time. If any of you have ever been in a situation like that, do not go back in. Just get help, and always trust your instincts. Hey Swamp Dweller, I've been listening to your channel for a while now. I came across it during the pandemic, and it has been a saving grace for my sanity. I have a story in which I will use fake names, as I'm uncertain whether my friends want their names posted. My name will also be fake. I'm going to send the scarier encounters I've had in the future as well if you would like to hear about those. I've had what you can call many ghost encounters, and I'm happy to share them. The stories I'm going to describe are true, and you can find the real locations on a map and even find news articles about one of the places. We will start with the burned down house. My name is Charlotte. Me and friends would regularly explore a very old burned down house. Let me give you the setting. It is North Texas, near the Oklahoma border. The burned down house is one of those huge plots of land that was probably once farmland or cattle grazing fields. It's a massive property. It is on the side of a large 4-lane highway that runs between DFW and Oklahoma. There is a few decent-sized cities about 15 minutes away from this burned-down house with about probably 100,000 people or more. But once out of town and on the highway, it becomes really rural very fast, and you almost immediately feel like you are in the middle of nowhere. The turnoff of the burned-down house is exceedingly difficult to see, as it is literally just a dirt path perpendicular to the road. Railroad tracks run parallel to the road, and one must park between the tracks and the entry gate to get to the driveway of the house, meaning if a train comes, you are stuck there until it moves. To get to the house, one must park their car by the tracks and abandon it, and then walk a quarter mile or more up this dirt driveway. The exterior walls of the house are decently intact, as it was made of stone and brick. It burned down sometime around 1975, but there is zero part of the roof left, at all. Entirely open to the stars above, behind the main house is a garage with an attached room or shop that was spared most of the fire damage as it was pretty far behind the main house. There is a huge grain silo about 50 yards away that is also fully intact. So, for the story. Most of the time we visited this place, it was super creepy, but rather uneventful. The reason this place is haunted is because of that fire. 2 brothers had a large coin collection valued at a lot of money. They donated them to a museum, but the people who murdered them were unaware. Their house was burned down to steal this coin collection that had already been donated, and well, the 2 brothers died. So, 5 of us are at my friend's house getting ready for our midnight adventure. We will call that friend Leah. Leah did not really believe in the supernatural at all, but found the adventure and the possibility of finding something cool along the way worth her time, so she always tagged along. Then we had Jeff, Jessica, and Karina. As the 5 of us are readying for our adventure, this was around 2011 by the way, Leah finds a ghost detector app to download on her phone that is supposed to pick up electromagnetic waves. None of us believe this will work because why would it? Before we leave, she decides to load up the app and take a magnet from the fridge to see if anything happens, and to our surprise, the little bars went up. Think like how you have radiation detectors and that goes up in colored bars. It's the same thing. We all have a good laugh and make a joke about how if there are any magnets left at the burned down house, we will find them. We set off with me driving. I always drove because I was the only one with a car usually. We arrive, carefully pull over, and park. We quickly turn lights off so we are not spotted because this is trespassing. We hop the fence and begin the slight incline of the dirt driveway. Alas, we make it to the house, but before we go in, we decide to check out the grain silo as not everyone in the group had been here yet, and they wanted to see absolutely everything this place had to offer. We check out the creepy garage and make our way back to the front of the burned down house. We all step inside and begin looking around, just admiring the sad beauty of this place. The house is not very large, and what used to be a fireplace is pretty much smack dab in the middle of this house, with small foliage growing out of it. We are all standing there, kind of doing our own thing and checking the stuff out. Leah decides this is a perfect time to turn on her ghost detector app, and let me tell you what, Swamp Dweller, not even one of us was prepared for what happened next. I want to also say, this land is very flat with minimal trees and nowhere to really hide. So, we had walked around the entirety of this structure probably 3 or more times, with not an animal peep or shuffle of any sort. So Leah turns on her ghost app, and lo and behold, she is waving it in the air, not close to anything, and it starts going off. We all kind of laugh because, okay, sure. About 5 seconds after the detector went crazy, a large rock or loose brick from the house hits the wall outside. Everyone does their thing where they look around to see who is missing from the group, but we were all there. Less than 5 feet apart from one another. No one could have run out of the house, thrown that large object, and made it back in without hearing the footsteps and movement, as we were all way too close to each other. And, being that there was no roof at all, we should have heard footsteps or some other sound that would have indicated someone was there. We always took flashlights out there, and there was no one out there. We searched very, very well. After our terrifying realization of, that couldn't have been an animal because the brick hit way too high on the wall, and how did we not hear or see anyone out there? We bolted. We started running full speed to the driveway. About halfway down the driveway, we kind of cooled off and started just walking and enjoying again. What terrified me the most about this night wasn't even the brick, though that was truly terrifying. What scared me the most is that as we were walking back to the car, Leah bolts past us running full speed. Leah does not like to run. She does not believe in the paranormal either, so it's weird to see this. She is very calm and literally plays horror games and loves horror movies. She does not scare easily, and she was running for her life out of nowhere. So I start running too because I think we are being chased by a psycho human or a coyote. When we finally make it to the car, I open the doors and everybody gets in. I look at Leah like, what the hell are you doing, dude? And I said, why were you running? Still terrified, she says, it was nothing. I'm like, dude, that was not nothing. What did you see? She said I saw this bush, but something behind it moved, and I just kept telling myself it was the bush, but I do not think it was. There was no wind that night. The bushes had no greenery because it was just before spring when everything blooms. It took us a while to go back there. We managed all to make it out of there safely, but to this day, I have no idea how the brick got thrown. I have no idea what we saw in the bushes, and I'm absolutely terrified of what could be lurking out there. I have another encounter from a haunted school that was abandoned in the 1920s if you would like me to submit that one as well. It was also in North Texas. Thank you for sharing my story. I have worked for the United States Forest Service here in Texas for just shy of 10 years now. I love my job, and it is rare for anything particularly creepy or scary to occur. But having worked this job for so long, I have my fair share of stories I can share that might just make the hairs on the back of your neck stand on end. For example, we sometimes get jaguars hunting in the forest here, a particularly scary big cat, and that is because of what they do to their prey once they are caught and subdued. So just picture the scene. You are walking through the trees on some bright, sunny day when suddenly you start to smell something rotten. You look around, but there is nothing to be seen. It's just this grotesque, terrible smell. All you see around you are these picturesque view of pines, and the sound of birdsong floating through the green. Then something hits the top of your head. Something wet. You place a hand on the top of your head, feeling something cold and slimy dribbling through your hair. You bring your hand down to see what it is, hoping it's not bird poo. Only, it is something way worse. It's blood. You look up, and hanging up in a tree just above your head is a mutilated, half-eaten corpse of an animal. Guts torn out, skin shredded, face half-eaten, with hooves or paws missing, with broken pieces of bone protruding from cracked limbs. It seems an utterly bizarre thing to do, but the jaguar has a good reason for doing all of this heavy lifting. If a jaguar does not bother to hoist its kill into a tree, it risks losing its meal to other more ground-based predators or scavengers. Creepy, yeah, but that kind of natural world stuff is nothing compared to some of the other stuff I've encountered during my time in the Forest Service. So this other time, I am on a routine walk, going through some of the trails to make sure all the directional signs and informational markers for tourists are all in order. There is a large rock protrusion about 100 meters from this trail. It's like this big sandstone boulder that juts out of the earth that has kind of like a shallow cave carved out of it. It's been worn away from thousands of years of wind erosion. After I get closer, I see a guy in what I first thought was camouflage hunting gear hanging around the entrance. I call out to him, just some friendly greeting, nothing threatening, and he turns to look at me. Only he does not say a word, he just runs off through the trees. I start getting worried about what he was doing in the cave, terrified he has left a body or something there, and honestly, I thank God he had not. But it does seem like he left something behind. I mean, I'm honestly not 100% sure it was him that did this, and I often considered the possibility that it was him that happened across the little find first, and seeing me, he got the idea in his head that it was me that left that thing there. He got the idea into his head, saw me, and just freaked out. But when I walked into the little cave and shined my flashlight around, I saw something that would completely explain why he was so quick to run away, whatever his motivations were. Teeth. There was a little circular patch of dirt, one that looked like it had been raked over to clear some space, and in the middle of it all were a bunch of human teeth. I do not know why they were there. I do not know who left them or why. But I did what I could. I gathered them up into a little plastic bag I had on me that I had previously had my lunch in, and took them down to the nearest police station, giving a little description of the guy that I had seen run away from the cave. I have the usual wild animal encounters, weird noises during the night, but I have never forgotten those teeth. I have no explanation to offer up at all, but it certainly does make for a good little campfire story.
Thanks for listening to these creepy and downright strange outdoors and deep woods horror stories that'll freak you out tonight. If you enjoyed these stories, please be sure to slap that like button as it helps me out a ton. If you're new to the swamp, why not join us? Be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new episode, as I upload multiple episodes a week on all things natural and supernatural. If you're on the go but don't have YouTube Premium but still want to download and listen to your favorite Swamp Dweller scary stories no matter where you are, you can download them absolutely free from Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, and pretty much everywhere else you find your favorite podcast online. I'd love to know in the comments down below what story was your favorite. If you made it all the way to the end, tonight's code word is Whispering Pines.